All right. So it's a rematch of last year's Wimbledon final. It's Alcaraz versus Djokovic. This is a match which everyone was hoping for to see in the finals. We already knew that Alcaraz and Sinner could only meet in the semifinals, so either one of them would be in the finals, and we were hoping that Djokovic would make it through to the finals. We weren't sure because Djokovic had recently had a knee surgery and he was also not in his top form. He still isn't in his top form. So, what will happen tomorrow? That's the big question. Now, to analyze that, there are a lot of points to go through, so this could be a long video, but we'll try to first look at the key parameters uh, based on which our analysis will be based. We'll also look at, yes, the last year's final match statistics, the key factors in the last year's final, the head to head record, and what has changed since last year to this year, what are the key factors for the current match, and the predictions as well. So, to start off, I would first talk about the key parameters, but even before I get to the key parameter, for me, when I do the preview or the analysis before a match, the most important thing which I feel is the matchup. How compatible is the game between the two opponents, Djokovic and Alcaraz? Now, every player has their strengths and weaknesses. For example, we know that Federer's backhand was a relative weakness against Nadal. Similarly, Djokovic's slice or the use of slice against Djokovic is a weakness for Djokovic. We saw Nadal use that at the US Open 2013. We saw him use it against Djokovic at Wimbledon as well. We saw Federer use that weakness against Djokovic at Wimbledon. So it's one thing to have the strengths and weaknesses. Every player has those. And the other point is the opponent good enough, or does the opponent have the skills to exploit that weakness? So if we talk about Sinner, if we keep aside Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer, the top guys, how many players on the tour are currently there who can exploit these weaknesses of the top players? Very few, right? And that is why these players still keep on winning. Now, when I talk about Alcaraz, he is a completely different player right now. The reason is he doesn't have a visible weakness. So we know that Taylor Fritz has a weakness when facing slice. We know Federer had the weakness for the backhand. Nadal's first serve was a liability against the top players. But if I ask what is the weakness of Alcaraz, if Djokovic has to find a strategy, where should he attack? And that's a very tough question because as of now, there isn't any weakness in Alcaraz's game. The only thing is his young age, and because of that he has a lot of excitement, which means he may choose the wrong shots, he may go for too much, and he may lose his focus quickly. He may also regain it back, but these are the only things which Djokovic could exploit, right? But when you talk about Alcaraz, now he knows that slice, drop shots, moving Djokovic from side to side, not giving him much pace, those are all the things that Alcaraz can use against Djokovic. Plus the age factor. Djokovic is not 25 or 30 anymore, right? So he is in the latter stage of his career. He is also coming back from a knee surgery, so he won't be as quick as we have seen him throughout his career. So again, there are more doubts on Djokovic's end of the court than Alcaraz's end of the court. Now let's get to the key parameters. We'll talk about the head to head record. We'll talk about the current form of both the players. We'll discuss the surface. We'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses. And we'll talk about the fitness levels. So, these are the key parameters on which the analysis is based on. Now, if we talk about the head to head record, Djokovic leads Alcaraz by 3 matches to 2. It's again, as I mentioned in my previous videos, it's a very close call, so we cannot go by the head to head record. The important thing is there are 2 points. If you talk about things in Djokovic's favor, he has won the last 2 meetings. And one was the last one, which was in the O2 finals or semi finals, I think. That was very one sided match. So I think Djokovic can look at that victory and say that, okay, I've been able to beat this guy last time, and that was pretty one-sided. And that is the good thing for Djokovic. And the good thing for Alcaraz, obviously, is last year's final. He knows that he has been able to beat Djokovic at Wimbledon in a five-set match, in a pressure match, and Alcaraz has just gotten better from that match till now, whereas Djokovic's level has obviously dropped as compared to last year because of the fitness issues and the issues in form. And the testimony to that is that he hasn't won a title this year. So obviously he's still looking, he's still searching for his top form. So head to head record doesn't matter that much. Current form, I already mentioned, Alcaraz is in better form right now. The surface, one would say, would prefer Djokovic because he has won so many matches here. He has won against Federer, Nadal, all that competition. But what I've seen is Alcaraz has a very similar sort of movement like Djokovic. He can slide on the court. He can hit that sliding backhand down the line, which is a trademark Djokovic shot. He has a great feel at the net. We saw the match against Medvedev. He was able to volley so well, and he was able to close the points at the net. He's able to use the drop shot. So I don't feel that the surface is preferred or it favors any player like Djokovic or Alcaraz, because both of them love this surface. Their game loves this surface. Talking about strengths and weaknesses, I feel Djokovic's weakness is the lack of pace. So if Alcaraz doesn't give him any pace to work with, using a low and slow slice, but a deep slice, and if he is able to change directions, because only hitting the slice will not work, he has to change directions on the slice. So if Djokovic hits a backhand, Alcaraz has to hit a slice deep down the line. What it does is it keeps your opponent moving from side to side so that the opponent is tiring as the point goes on, and it doesn't allow the opponent to attack. So it causes frustration, and then the opponent has to take an action, right? Either they will chip and charge the net again, which opens up an opportunity for a passing shot, or they would try to go for too much and hit a non percentage shot from that position. Again, that would help the opponent. So those are the things where I think Djokovic is a little bit vulnerable. Plus, the current form and the fitness level of Djokovic is still doubtful. So those are the weaknesses for him. Strengths, I think the first serve is the key for Djokovic. He is serving well in this tournament. He needs to continue that, and he needs to make that first serve effective. So in last year's final, we'll discuss the statistics, but I feel that Djokovic's first serve percentage was good, but the points won on the first serve were not that good. That percentage was around 60 to 65%, which is low as compared to the other players. And the reason is that he was afraid to attack after a good first serve. Now that is one thing which he needs to change. So we know how Alcaraz returns. He's a good returner of the ball, so he may give a short return or a deep return, but it would still be in the hitting zone for Djokovic. So Djokovic needs to make that decision that he has to go for the open court. He has to hit with some power. He has to be aggressive. And then when he sees that Alcaraz is on the run, he has to go to the net. Now we all know that Alcaraz has got good speed. So there would be occasions where he would be able to run to the net and counter the volley hit by Djokovic. He would be able to use the passing shots like he did against Medvedev. But still, it shouldn't stop Djokovic from coming to the net, because even Medvedev, who doesn't come to the net as often, even he had some success yesterday when he played against Alcaraz, because he took that chance. He knew that he has to do that, and he was committed to it. And Djokovic, I think, is a much better volleyer as compared to Medvedev. So I think he would have more chances of winning the points from the forecourt rather than the backcourt, because of his fitness levels as well as his form. Now, talking about Alcaraz, I feel only his concentration is his weakness right now, and the overexcitement, because of which he tries to hit some miraculous shot, and that may cost him. It almost cost him against Medvedev. It has cost him earlier as well. So he needs to avoid doing that. Other than that, I think if he can keep a balanced game, it's for Djokovic's match to win. Djokovic has to change things around. Alcaraz has to play a decent match, and that should be enough for him to win. Fitness wise, as we all know, there are doubts about Djokovic's fitness. Alcaraz, as of now, has looked pretty good. So I feel he would be ready to go to 5 sets if that is required. Now, talking about the head to head, it's 3-2 in favor of Djokovic. I think we already discussed this. But just looking at their last couple of meetings, one was in the O2 semi final and one was in Cincinnati. Cincinnati, again, was a very close encounter. Djokovic almost lost that match in the second set. He was feeling physically as well, but somehow he was able to turn it around. Wimbledon, Alcaraz won that, and we'll discuss this match in detail. And before that, I don't think we should discuss those other matches. Those are not relevant anymore. Now, talking about last year's Wimbledon final, that this is very important. Now, if you see, it was such a close match, and if you see the statistics, the first serve percentage, Djokovic is up there with 64. It's better slightly than Alcaraz. The number of aces is very few, and that is partly because Djokovic was not hitting his spots well, and also because Alcaraz was returning well. So Djokovic needs to ensure that he is targeting the right spots and putting more first serves in. And even if Alcaraz is able to return the ball, Djokovic needs to be on the aggressive, right? So you can see 62% of first serve points won. That is low as compared to Alcaraz. Now we all know that Alcaraz has got so much power in his game that he is going to go for more winners, and he will be successful in doing so, which is very well proven by this number. So 66 winners were hit by Alcaraz as compared to 32. It's double the number of winners Djokovic hit. Now this needs to change. If this statistic does not change, then it will be difficult for Djokovic to win. I'm not saying that Djokovic needs to hit more winners than Alcaraz, but he needs to stay somewhere close to around 70 to 80% of the winners as compared to Alcaraz, and Djokovic needs to make less unforced errors. You can see he hit 32 winners and made 40 unforced errors, which is not the characteristic of Djokovic. He is supposed to be a player who plays in the zone, makes very few errors. So I don't think that he played the match completely well last year. But the reason for that is Alcaraz, because Alcaraz completely shocked Djokovic by the level of play he had, specifically after the first set. Because the first set, Alcaraz lost it 1-6. He was completely blown away. But then Djokovic came back and he was able to then Alcaraz came back, and then he was able to change the complexion of the match. Uh, when you talk about the other factors, I think it's all very close. So the last year's match was, I think, a great performance by both the players. This year's performance, I don't feel that it would be that good because both players are having some difficulty. They are having some issues, but still, it should be a close match. Now, talking about the key factors from the last year's final, Djokovic's first serve wasn't as effective. Djokovic was ahead. Now, it's very easy to look at the scoreline right now and say that Alcaraz just turned around the game and he beat Djokovic. It's not like that. It's not that easy. If you look at the complete match, Djokovic had the match completely in his control. It was on his racket. He won the first set 6-1. He was down a break in the second, but he got the break back. And in the tiebreaker, he was 6-5 ahead, and he made two errors consecutively, which were not forced errors. Those were completely unforced errors on Djokovic's part, and those two errors came from backhand wing of Djokovic, which is supposedly his better shot. And that changed the match around because after that second set, the third set, Alcaraz completely shocked Djokovic, and Djokovic was visibly frustrated. He tried to get back in the fourth set, but it was too late. And in the fifth set, Djokovic was completely under pressure. But all of this would not have happened if Djokovic would have won the second set and at least taken 1 point out of those two that he missed. He would have won the second set and the match would have been over. Now, the other tactics which I want to talk about, and I think I have discussed this in my analysis of the last year's final, is that Djokovic did not play tactically well. And the reason for that is because he was not prepared. He did not know what to expect from Alcaraz. Now, this year, at least Djokovic is aware of what Alcaraz will bring to the table and how Djokovic needs to counter that. Now, whether he's able to execute that, whether he's able to actually play that well, that's to be seen. But last year, he thought the same strategy that he has been using against the other players would still work against Alcaraz, but it did not happen. So he tried to counterpunch from the baseline, he tried to win from the baseline, and suddenly he realized that it's not working. And he was in two minds whether to play aggressive or whether to wait for errors from Alcaraz. He just did not know, and it was easy for him to continue with that strategy of playing from the baseline because in the past other players have faltered at some or the other stage in the match and Djokovic has been able to push for the victory, but it did not happen last year. So I think now Djokovic is aware that that sort of strategy of playing well from the baseline, defending well, the slide, no matter how much slide Djokovic puts in, I think that's not going to be enough against Alcaraz. So he needs to change something. He knows the strategy against Nadal. He knows the strategy against Federer. Similarly, now he knows how he has to play to win against Alcaraz. Now it all depends on the execution. Now, I think in the fifth set also, even with all these mistakes that Djokovic had done in the second set, the match was still not over. And in the fifth set, again, Djokovic had a break point early on and he faltered under pressure. He missed a drive volley, which was visibly like it was not that difficult by Djokovic's standards. So that was a huge, huge point, and he was too frustrated after that. And I think that was the match for me. Now, key factors in this year's final and what has changed when we compare last year's final to this year's final. A lot has changed, right? So, number one thing, this year, Djokovic is serving really well and he needs to continue that and take it to the final. The use of slice and drop shots would be the key for Alcaraz. Now he knows how Musetti and some of the other players have been able to trouble Djokovic. So he would try to use that slice and dice sort of tactic. Obviously, he has that power. Whenever he wants, he can rip a forehand or a backhand and hit it for a winner. But I think more or less he would still try to use the slice and drop shots to keep Djokovic guessing and break Djokovic's rhythm. For Djokovic, I think he needs to play aggressive and he needs to change directions on his shots because Alcaraz likes to run around his backhand and use his off forehand, inside out forehand, and construct the rally point. If Djokovic caters to that and if Djokovic plays in that fashion, then he's going to lose because that would give Alcaraz a lot of time to just have that exchange and decide when to pull the trigger. So Djokovic, because he is good at changing directions, he needs to ensure that he is alternating between forehand, between the down the line and the cross court backhand and forehand, so that Alcaraz is always on the run, or even if he is not on the run, at least the point is well balanced. So that is what Djokovic needs to do. Now, the closed roof could help Djokovic, I feel, and the only reason is to remove the wind factor. Last year, the match was in open conditions, and some experts believe that those unforced errors that came from Djokovic in last year's final were partly due to the wind factor. And even yesterday, both the matches were in the open, right? And there was definitely a wind factor when playing against the wind, players were being broken. We saw it in both the matches. So 7 out of 9 times, I think the breaks happened from the end where the wind was against the side, right? So if such thing happens, then I think it's not good for Djokovic because he tends to falter on that. If it's closed roof, then at least all the other external factors are taken away and everything comes down to the actual shot making that the players are doing. Now, both players are not playing well as compared to last year, but Alcaraz is playing relatively better than Djokovic. And let's put it in other words, there are so many doubts on Djokovic's play, Djokovic's health. Djokovic's form, Djokovic's strategy, Djokovic's tactic, all those things. But there are very few doubts on Alcaraz. The only doubt which I have is the pressure and the lack of focus that Alcaraz has in between his matches, right? That's the only thing. Other than that, I think his game is right where it needs to be. And if he balances all those things out, I think he would be the favorite. And pressure would still be on Djokovic. Let's not forget that Alcaraz is still pretty young. He's 21 years of age. He has already won multiple Grand Slams. So even if he loses this match, it's not going to be the end of the world. Obviously, if he loses, he knows that he will lose to Djokovic. So again, it puts all the pressure on Djokovic because he is 37 years of age. He's coming back from an injury. He knows that Sinner and Alcaraz are getting better day by day. So I'm not sure how many chances he will have to win Grand Slam. So he would think that maybe this is his chance, which gives him some motivation, but at the same time, which also adds pressure. And I also feel that Djokovic needs to win the first set. Last year also he was able to win the first set, but now it's even more important because if he loses the first set, it would give a lot of confidence to Alcaraz. And when Alcaraz is in confidence, just like Federer, he can steamroll through the match. He can go for more shots. He can take more risks. And because he has that skill set, Alcaraz, he has that variety. He can execute all those shots, but it's very difficult to do that under pressure or when the match is balanced. That is why it's important for Djokovic to take the first set so that he doesn't allow Alcaraz to play freely. And obviously, Djokovic's knee would be tested because Alcaraz is going to use a lot of slices, drop shots, and he's going to make Djokovic run from side to side. Djokovic definitely cannot afford to make any blunders on big points last year, or else the result would be the same. Now, with players like Alcaraz and Nadal and Federer, they give you very, very few chances, and you have to take those. If you don't take those, then I'm afraid the match is over. Now, the pattern of play that Djokovic needs to avoid is this one. I have already explained that. So, if Djokovic stays at this part of the court, and if he trades cross court backhands, two or three shots, then it actually goes in favor of Alcaraz. So you can see Alcaraz has, because he has so much power, he has that opportunity to hit the shots at any part of the court. So I feel Djokovic needs to change direction. He needs to go to a backhand, then the forehand. It's easier said than done, but he needs to try to do that 50 to 60% of the time so that he has more chances. Now, talking about prediction. So, overall, looking at the resume, looking at the current form, looking at last year's final, looking at their game, every factor, if you consider overall, I feel Alcaraz is the favorite to win this match. And he needs to play 90% of his game, 90% of his level to win the match. Djokovic needs to produce 100% of his level. The reason being, he is not as fast as he used to be. He is not in good form. He hasn't won a title this year. The experience from last year wasn't great. He lost here. So there would be added pressure on Djokovic. So he has to give answers to all these questions. So he has to bring his A game. He has to play 100% well to win the match. For Alcaraz, things are a bit on the easier side relatively, and that is why I feel it would be safe to say that Alcaraz should win this in four sets. But if Djokovic plays 100%, then anything can happen. So that's the analysis, guys. Thanks for watching.